flowing river split like a knife's edge across the landscape, and on either side one could witness nations flourishing. All species and cultures of people grew on either side, and in both the land and water below, even more nefarious creatures lurked. On the surface of the northern beaches, a coalition forms. It contained the mercantile stick golems of the Alchemist League, the scientific faction of purple-skinned humans known as the Loose Cannons, and the human prophets of Myrus. One brisk autumn afternoon, a group of scientist humans with light purple pigmented skin descends upon the valley. These tight-knit groups of operatives known as the Loose Cannons were led by a CO and further oversaw by a classified power structure. Currently, status among their superiors is abysmal, and their degree of clearance is kept minimal. Loose cannons are attempting to prove themselves and move higher in the chain of command. With urgency, they set up a headquarters to the north of the Great River. Steel structures were erected and a laboratory was built over the course of several months. Lead researcher Percy Pops McGarren begins researching the nearby species, while CJ Reeves, a scout of the Loose Cannons, explores the nearby civilizations, radioing back their information to the lead mechanist, known simply as the Architect. And this time they discover many of the locals that inhabited the region and found them with unique and strange properties. The Alchemist League is a very reclusive race, only recently heading out of their forest home to trade strange wooden trinkets and items. First unable to speak the outsider's tongue, they with surprising speed learned and adapted to their language. Now they are able to speak both common and the rarer dialects of their neighbors. Their advancement doesn't stop there. From wooden goods, they now sell advanced and interesting items of the woods, opening their prospects to all who would want to trade. Little known by the other factions, they do this through a process known as transmutation, using wood to form at different strengths, structuring itself to be as hard as steel or as flexible as plastic. Technically, not the exact same material, but synthetic copies of these materials that match these properties. Their market soon opens their doors to the Loose Cannons and establishes trade routes. To the east of the scientists, a commune of very pale humans calling themselves the Monks of Myrus, guided by Morris, a skilled cleric of the order that had delved into forbidden tomes. A great evil is going to appear soon, and the goal of him and his people is to preserve all life, specifically the souls of all life. They stand out with their gestures and behavior. They are friendly and social to others, holding an aura of calmness and curiosity. Wearing robes with various patterns and dyes, their lead expert waymaker, Killian, a taller man with radiant green, keen eyes and longer hair tied into a braided ponytail, is the first that CJ Reeves meets from the village. Sharing a passion for blazing new trails, a peace accord is quickly made as the two drink freshly brewed tea from the monks' gardens. And so, on the surface of the northern beaches, a coalition had formed. As the first year of the Loose Cannons' arrival began to come to a close, two elusive undergrounder races began to emerge to the surface, pulled first by curiosity of the bustling, merging factions. Undergrounder faction of the Lightseekers was an ancient race of humanoids, with skin in shades of blue and white, sturdy torsos rising to a thick neck and a sharp head with a starved feature, bearing a single large eye encased in glass. Their council, led by a seer, lights a flame, in which he educates his people on the world beyond and what they will see once they go out to it. They had in the past century lost their grandeur and their control of the overworld to a creature described by the seer as a shadowy spire with a great glowing head surrounded by metal tentacles, a great beast that stole the sun from the lands. When one of these people, called Profundi, or deep dwellers in the common tongue, go to the great beyond, they die in seconds from the sun's rays, and their souls give energy to the flame keepers, golems created by the council through strictly prohibited magics. It is a held secret of the council that the last way a Profundi died decided which flamekeeper their soul would reside in the afterlife. The flamekeepers were fierce heroes of the people, golems that could survive the overworld as they had finished their holy purpose below ground. Of the flamekeepers, there are three. Ki Ambulat, the Wanderer, represents the lost, the weaker souls who have lost their identity and are now left to wander. Umbra Simulus represents wariness, humbleness, and the people who looked away from the sun as they died. And Flamma Intus, who represents the ambitious, the greedy. The creature is composed of the souls of magicians, the seers, and other people of strong will. The council led their people with a cold hand, and very few knew the truth of the outside world. That is why when Q Ambulat arrived at the surface, a great many questions plagued him, and a seed of doubt began to form. Meanwhile, as Q contacted the people of the surface, Umbra Simulus and Flemma Intis reached out to an old threat of the Profundi, the Magma Zool. These creatures were more animal than person. 9 foot tall and 5 foot wide, these lizards often stood on their hind legs. They had the capability to consume minerals and superheat them in their stomachs. They used this as a primal form of metallurgy. They were led by a dictatorship that was ruled by the strongest, until the strongest was eaten by the next war chief, of course. As Umbra cowered silently in the nearby shadows, Flamma boldly spoke to these creatures and negotiated a peace treaty. Magmazul reluctantly accepted, as growing fear of the overworlder's powers began to sink in. As the coalition of the North steadily grew in number, the local tribes of the river had surprises of their own. The native folk of the Beast Nation were scattered clans of a variety of creatures. Satyrs, centaurs, and various fae folk watched the beaches as separate but neutral clans. The clans would scavenge and raid the weaker, vulnerable villages. A rule of the fittest was normalized. That all changed one day when a manticore, the self-proclaimed Beast King, used his powerful magics to begin forcing the divided clans into an alliance, with the new mantra, the strong should protect the weak. As the Beast King's influence spread, his ambassadors traveled to the long-forbidden territory of the Cliffs of Lament. Located upstream, a sickly sweet song hypnotized the ambassadors, but not the Beast King. His magic refuted the song as he came face to face with the terrifying but beautiful creature, Queen Donna of the Sirens. These merfolk hissed at the Beast King's powers, threatening to feed him to their guppies. The king loomed over them with a booming voice, but then saw their sunken, tired faces. The queen spoke of their stolen fishing grounds taken by the Northern Coalition. The king offered his own shores in return for their fealty. The Sirens' general Nerissa hissed in refusal, knowing they could instead take the lands by force. But Queen Donna silenced her, and instead offered the king an alliance, as equals. After some hesitation, the king agreed, and so the beginnings of the Southern River Alliance was formed. No sooner had the alliance been established, the Beast Nation was contacted by their neighbors. Steel giants of mysterious origin had grown their borders next to the Beast King's land. They called themselves the Empire of Omnius, their lands forming these large structures hidden within the mountain face that led to a cavern-like structure deep beneath the ground. Geometric shapes grow like moss, taking over forgotten ruins. Within these geometric caves are large, empty expanses, which are filled upon creation of new structures, resembling humanoids. Multi-eyed faces, hidden behind sheets of metal forming armor over their large stature. Oneg the Prober, an ambassador of the Giants, greeted the Beast King after scanning him of his language, and transfers their conversation to Jovian the Enactor, the lead researcher of the faction. After establishing common ground, they speak to the awakening of their consciousness. The automatons saw the pain and suffering around them. The machines wished to unite all others underneath a universal banner of peace and harmony. The Beast King immediately saw the potential and justness in an alliance with them, and so another member was joined. A great blue tear, crackling with ethereal energy, ripped across the sky, and collapsed down on a mountain south of the Omnius. No sooner had there begun to appear strange floating stones, formed in the shape of humanoids. When not in sleep mode, these floating drones appeared before other races with 4 arms, 2 out of each side, and 3 eyes in front. Most of the time, only 1 eye is revealed, and the other 2 on either side of the center eye are used when inventing. They allow the main eye to filter its vision between electrical currents, to let it run a visual diagnostic on what's wrong with something, and to see the base elements and alloys used within the machine and device, and where those specific components are. In sleep, also called hide mode, they look like simple rocks, kind of like boulders, but a bit shinier due to their metal exterior. The drones would greet their neighbors saying, "I am the factory," interestingly using I instead of we, clear sign of a hive mind. "I come here for I've exhausted all the possibilities for inventions in my home reality. My only wish here in the strange land is to research new inventions and possibly see them put to use, whatever that use may be." Well, anyways, I've kept you from your business for long enough. I bid you all farewell until we meet again, and I hope that we can all reap the rewards of this great land in peace and prosperity. Rather than align themselves with any faction, the 2 lead mechanics, Unit X7 and Unit Z386-72A-B3, they quickly began to work to grant great gifts to all their neighbors, and even including the ones of the coalition to the north. Wedged between these strange creatures and the factions lies a mountain range blanketed by thick, heavy clouds and a layer of snow. Small spots of light can be seen from a distance, marking the sparsely populated spots along the mountain face. Between the 2 large mountains is a low valley, with a small village spread out along the grassy plains. What lurks below is a vast network of caves and tunnels, mined and dug out by their inhabitants. Living within is the Dwarven Kingdom, ruled by their fearless and loved leader, King Durasir. The kingdom is very prosperous and well off, thanks to a free market economy and a strict code of military honor, fueled by the deep mines and factories they use to produce all kinds of mercantile products. Mine Overseer Vakar handles the majority of exports as well, and holds the title Chief of Army, ensuring only top quality in both his soldiers and his ores. Researcher Uzak, meanwhile, ensures the purity of the stones, as well as researches new and interesting ways to use the rare minerals. This faction soon became involved with the Southern River Alliance. Their edge of distrust was carried with them. Just to the west of the dwarves lived the final faction of this valley, a group of new arrivals calling themselves the Monks of Malice. Living deep in the forest, they mostly keep to themselves and out of reach from most empires, for they believe conflict is to be left to their lord and savior, Vil Acante. The monks themselves are surprisingly effective fighters, mostly utilizing stealth with their surroundings to ambush targets who would be a wonderful sacrifice to their leader. They have little to no sympathy for outsiders, only allowing very few into their borders for trade. One wrong move and their essence is to be absorbed by Vale. Vale himself is a very strong mage who has practiced his magics for a very long time. Since he could talk, he has been casting spells. He gained their trust long ago after saving them from a cataclysmic event that he caused, but of course the monks had no clue. Their unhindered devotion allows him to hide away and gather his power to become stronger and stronger. A perfect symbiosis has been benefiting both parties massively. These monks gain an omnipotent protector, and Vale gains resources and solitude for his studies in magic. One human in particular stands above the others, Sylvia Bellum, a human who knew Vale when they were both children. She has major knowledge in magic, which has caused the veins in her arms to glow a deep blue. This is the one Vale has ordered to be protected at all costs. Vale had greater plans for the Southern River Alliance, but knowing he had rivals across the river in the Monks of Myrus, he decided to play nice and wait for his opportunity, offering his indoctrinated services to the Alliance. Cycle 1. Development. With the two factions formed on either side of the river, tensions began to rise between the divide. In the Northern Coalition, the Myrus monks cultivated a new rare herb. This herb burned with a strange, invigorating incense, and they began work on a towering structure. With the many people working on it, using simple pulley systems, the people carried up large inscribed tablets into the air. Slowly, the masses of the ladders and the pulley systems began to move more and more sparse to reveal a form that contrasts the entire village. It has the form of a hand holding an open palm to the sky, as if to accept an item being passed downwards. This detail is impressive. Fingernails pour on the skins, wrinkles on the fingers, and even veins. Standing at about 70 feet into the air, it stands out from the rest of the buildings in the area. Countless inscriptions are written upon the oval tablets that form the hand. Towards the bottom of the tablet is a large sleeve. If one were to look down, it'd see a deep hole with countless offerings to the statue. An offered item could take up to 15 seconds to reach the bottom of the well-like offering pit. Yet it isn't all physical. A palpable feeling can be felt around the grand statue. It invokes an emotion of dutifulness and a deep yearning. It's an oddly spiritual feeling. Noticeably, the flowers and a few crops seem to grow, pointing towards the great statue. During the construction of this peculiar building, Killian the Waymaker investigates odd reports of animal attacks at the beach, and stumbles upon a fisherman's son being lured into the water by a siren. He dives in, saving the child, but not before the merfolk takes a chunk out of his leg. The siren general, Nerissa, looking for an afternoon snack and refusing to use the patronizing fishing grounds of the Beast King, hisses at Killian, his own blood spraying from her mouth. "You're not quite sure sirens actually exist. We are dangers your mothers warned you of to keep you from being swept away by the river, to keep you from drowning. That's how too many children die, you see. The raging river sweeps them away. You don't believe we are real. But are you sure? Every time the song of a siren is heard, many who hear it find themselves walking to the beach. Why? They don't know. They feel like they are called there. Fish are not enough to satisfy the sirens anymore, and they've tasted thicker blood. Good luck fighting the call now." With a splash, she disappears under the water, Killian saying a prayer with the saved boy to stave off the hypnotic voice of the siren. As the lizards of Magmazool construct a moat around their territory and use their combustive gut to fill it with carbon monoxide, the Light Seeker's hero, Ki Umbalat, explores the surface. He is a quiet, reserved creature. He wears a mask that covers half his face, and on one side is a blank slate of bronze, and on the other is a single wide-opened eye that looks constantly surprised and in awe of everything around it, and simply stop at certain areas just so his amazed eye can try to take in everything that it sees. He finds himself drawn to the caverns by innate and carnal desires. Why would he not? He has all and none of the time to see this wonder, and so he does. He does not plan to fight it, merely to observe. Others like Flamma can do those fruitless things. As he wanders the surface, he finds himself drawn to a large gaping hole in the ground, the Black Maw. The monks of Malice keep to themselves, but Sylvia shared her joy to Vale. One person comes by with too much liquor in their system, or just a little too ditzy, and BAM! Sylvia exclaimed. She was absolutely elated to finally get the ball rolling in this new part of the world. Her and Vale had been trying for so long to find a place to bunker down and finally get started on their plans, to show everyone that Vale is a force to be reckoned with. Vale remains silent. He was excited as well, but he doesn't ever vocalize such feelings. Sylvia sees right through him, though, and grabs his hand and pulls it towards her mouth to place her lips upon it. letting Vale know she acknowledges his feelings despite his silence. "We should have a speech to our people. Let them know that we are going to begin soon with the kidnappings and the espionage," Sylvia said while practically bouncing. Vale just nodded with a slight smile on his face. They discuss in thorough detail what they think should be said and what should be avoided to provide maximum morale, because without morale and devotion, they have nothing with these people. They both set forward upon their podium in the middle of the town and begin their speech. Sylvia stood front and center and called all the townspeople to the square. Once they all arrived, she gave the performance of her life, telling them that phase 1 of their plans had finally commenced. She wanted all of them to rally forward and be excited to finally be devoting their life to Vale in a way that matters. The sun shining brightly behind her, it's almost like the world was as excited for her speech as she was. By the end of it, Sylvia was beaming with happiness, and Vale was very satisfied with the speech as a whole. Now, all that was left was seeing how it would be absorbed into the public. Over the river, to the north, inside the warring, technologically advanced camp of the Loose Cannons, Agent C.J. Reeves had ventured out on a stealth mission to investigate the ancient tower detected near the HQ. Upon realizing the scope of the continent that is greater than previously thought, the Loose Cannons send a message to the hierarchy, requesting additional reinforcements. They got in contact with their undergrounder friend, Flamma Untus, to boost the signal using his anomalous properties. The agents send documents and photos of this creature to the hierarchy to show that they're actually doing their jobs and investigating strange things already. After scouting the tower, C.J. Reeves finds a strange console on the second floor. He grabs the architect and pops to investigate it, and turns the tower online. The moment the tower flashes with lights is the moment they realize they made a miscalculation. A large purple dome descends on top of the Loose Cannons and several of their northern neighbors, trapping them inside this strange shield wall, while Pops and the architect attempt to fix the dome. In the deepest part of the extensive dwarven caves, 2 mines will be constructed, one in each mountain peak, to begin the extraction of a new bountiful resource that has been discovered, tritanium. It is an ultra-hard metal that can be forged into building supplies or weapons. While this is going on, the kingdom has regular guard patrols along the tunnels and entrances to the network. They even bump into some drones from the factory, who seem to have got lost in the middle of a desert storm down south. Or at least that's what they say. These drones offer an invention known as the dimensional lens. The lens permanently and painlessly alters one of the eyes to allow them to see PDE and KDE, potential and kinetic dimensional energy. Possible uses mechanically would go ahead and allow anybody to see these RADs, reality-altering devices, such as the glasses Tome. When they go ahead and use this, they begin to see large surges of power spreading across the valley. It's a very interesting device indeed that the factory has granted them. Onig, the giant robot construct from Omnius, explores the nearby Black Maw, bumping into Key. The 2 constructs descend into the depths, agreeing to work together as they explore. The Maw beats with a strange energy, and as they descend they encounter newly risen soulless meat sacks, a crude attempt at returning life. These creatures chase the 2 deeper down the Maw, until they slip and are swallowed by it entirely. When they come back to their senses, emerged from the ground with black vines, Oneg is clothed in flesh, becoming a living, breathing creature, and Key has become hollowed, emptied of his centuries' worth of souls, and those souls resurrected, walking again and overpopulating the underground. Cycle 2. Kidnapping. Unit X7 finds himself deep in calculations regarding the makings of a last resort puppet doll from the factory dimension. "If only I could remember the plans for this device," they think to themselves. Laying in front of them is a blank sheet of specialized metal used by his species to contain blueprints, for they are quite durable and don't fail the test of time. If successful, the blueprint would give directions in the making of a puppet doll, in the liking of whatever race creates it, and is automatically used in response to a death blow. When used, the puppet takes the hit, so to speak, leaving the main target unharmed. Each puppet is unique to the unit it's attached to. If one tries to sever its bond with it, the puppet becomes inert. Oneg returns with a body of flesh and bone as the constructs are perplexed by his form. Oneg does not focus on such a trivial problem, but instead gathers some supplies and travels to find Key's nation and return him to his people. As he travels, his body weakens and he experiences hunger and pain. Eventually, he succumbs to his newly achieved mortality. Oneg clutches his body as it begins to cease function, the blood flowing through the cracked metal sheets. How fascinating. To die is such a concept we've yet to completely understand. Organic life forms are truly incredible. Oneg collapses, his organic body spilling over the metal plates and melding it all together. A blossom tree sprouts from where he once stood, a symbol that organic and inorganic life can coexist. And so he dies as he delivers Key's husk back to his people. Vale, meanwhile, began preparations to have a massive party that all will be invited to, and while that is happening, he will kidnap a few individuals for sacrifice to strengthen him. They waste absolutely no time attempting to bundle some leftover crops together as a form of party food, and setting their market up as a main hub of the festivities. A great feast is held by the monks of Myrus. Vale welcomes the party guests, and during the party speaks. They make it as intriguing as possible, and so that all the leaders would feel more than obligated to drink tons of alcohol and be too sedated to care about a few of their missing troops. The biggest need was the alcohol, so Vale concocted his own brew of oak leaves and potato vodka, knowing a little alchemy is necessary for a mage after all. The brew actively boiled and wouldn't be completed until the following morning. In the meantime, they continued preparations. They also planned on hiding the soldiers, guarded until Vale gave the affirmative to begin the sacrifice. As the sirens appeared at the borders of the party, Vale made his move. Kidnapping a few of the straggling party guests was a breeze. Everything seemed to be going perfectly for the mage, ready to start garnering power and show everyone what he was made of. While the party continues on, the oblivious leaders of the Beast Nation and King Durasir of the Dwarves have a drinking competition, and, strangely enough, both become blackout, even ancient magics not protecting the Beast King from the delicious liquor. Deep underground below the plains, a state-of-the-art lab is created to allow for better understanding of the new metal being mined out from beneath the mountains. Researcher Uzak inhabits the lab, working tirelessly to formulate these new weapons, defensive and offensive. He even makes traps to make invading the kingdom incredibly costly. While this is happening, the Dwarf King, accompanied by a guard patrol of 10, travels to the monks in search of diplomatic relations. After a long shift in the lab, Uzak is convinced by the mine's overseer, Vakar, his only real friend in the kingdom, to join him in traveling to the ancient dwarven ruins at the very peak of the northern mountain. The ruins are seen as a secret place, where the first spawn of the dwarves eventually settled. The first spawn were wiped from the face of the planet by a hostile force. However, a few managed to escape and evade the hostilities, and eventually rebuilt their civilization underground. King Durasir is a direct descendant of the first spawn, which is what makes him king. Every so often, dwarves will make a pilgrimage to the ruins in search of answers to their questions and griefs. Together, researcher Uzak and General Vakar climb the northern mountain and take a knee in front of the mountains. "O great peoples of a time long past," Vakar starts, slowly dragging his hand along the cracked bricks. "I feel a great war brewing among the nations, so I ask you, what can we do to ensure the safety of the dwarven peoples? Can we trust these giant beings of metal and their intent to keep the peace with all nations south of the river?" Uzak kneels as well, following suit. They sit in silence for a while, waiting for a sign. Umbra Simulus's first memory was one of fear. For one moment through his eye, all he could see was light. That terrible, horrible light. Imagine, if you will, an ink dot in the middle of your vision. Like a cancer cell, it grows its long tentacles endlessly. Black, black, black. Filling your senses, occupying your vision till all you can see is darkness. Your tongue numb with a sickening dryness, your ears screaming to hear in the dark. For Umbra, his vision was the same, but with a harsh brightness. Every time he would wake, he would remember that all-encompassing brightness that had dwarfed his own self so much he could only run. Umbra is a simple being. He sleeps in the day. He wanders in the night, hiding from those who will do him harm, while helping those he can. He does not know why he is here, but he knows what he must do. For him, that is enough. Umbra's goal, as far as he knew, was to know what was hidden from sight. He knew the vast tunnels networks that crossed under these lands and sought to find what people existed on the other side of the river. Umbra investigates the dwarven faction and leaves a note, warning them that the sirens seek to end them. Why does he do this? He sees he is learning, but for who? He incites violence between people, but for whom does this benefit? These questions dwarf him, but the silk robes that keep around him makes him feel secure. Flamma Entus follows the radio waves of the purple skins to find out what could be making them. He is a being composed of older and hungrier people and craves knowledge in a power-hunger kind of way. He is amiable to the purple-skinned agents and trades information, however. He finds Key's body in a beautiful growing tree, bursting to life and to bloom from the body of the now-deceased Oneg. Flamma, seeing the emptied husk, tisks in disappointment, and behind efforts to resurrect him before the people discover his mortality. Flamma sends visions and sounds in the minds of the people as they go home, reminding them of the terror of home and the simple but beautiful life in Key. If they arrived, they would probably be met with a suspicion and asked if they went up to the surface, for things they described would be nothing like their teaching. And so he orders the whole soul's power towards the golems. He knows that it is only him and the seers who know about this power source. Mind you, Flamma is the most conscious of the overall situation, but he's also invested to keep it going. He controls the souls and forces them into the light, killing them, but successfully resurrecting Ki. The million voices become one, and Ki is disgusted to learn of his true origin. The Alchemist League, very secretive-like, develop the wooden coins currency. As multiple banks begin propping up through the Northern Coalition, they gain in influence and power. Meanwhile, the Purple Skins elevator music begins playing on the radios left by the loose cannons, at various spots near the factions. It sounds very strange and high-pitched, very nerdy music. An intern, calling himself Goku, failed to do anything but confuse and even anger some of the factions. Pops immediately begins researching the tower with his team, not only to disable the dome, but to control it, along with any other functions the tower may possess. Filling out their game and outgunned due to the lack of reinforcements from the hierarchy, the crew decide to use the solitary shadow of the dome as the perfect cover to begin constructing a super weapon, a powerful weapon platform aircraft, soon to be known as Chekhov's gunship. They're limited on resources, but maybe this time of crisis will drive the men to build perfection. While Pops and his fellow researchers attempt to make sense of the tower's mechanisms and controls, Agent Reeves searches around the other floors, hoping to find something of use. Meanwhile, the architects send a message to the factory through the radios after smacking Goku off them. Mechanisms? If you're capable of understanding, I have more than a few words for you. We are aware that you are not native to this realm, and while you may or may not come here with ill intention, you may have indirectly be at fault for it, at least in part. The very fabric of continuity has degraded further and further with each passing season, and the deity suggests that your arrival has worsened this significantly. Take these cave dwellers who neighbor my headquarters. They have informed us that they were forced underground a century ago by the inexplicable experience of a darkness creating a living lighthouse. Strange, yes? It gets stranger. These lighthouses have a very specific origin in an incident involving the unsanctioned use of a hideous magic, incarcerations from items dubbed the Glass's Tome. But the event in which sparked the creation of these living lights only occurred 2 months ago. How then did this creature roam around, causing devastations 100 years before its own creation? Worse still, there is a lasting side effect blightening the cave dwellers. The anachronistic anomaly has caused them to exhibit a violent reaction to sunlight, some slowly growing weak before expiring, some outright exploding. Study indicates no biological or even magical reasoning for this curse. The only possible cause, and one we've encountered a great deal of times, is a side effect of reality itself dying. Right now it is limited to them, but further logical happenings will no doubt begin if nothing is done. As for the dimensional instability created by your arrival, that can be mended with care, but not if someone is intentionally causing further damage. Threats to continuity must be dealt with first, and if you assist in that, we would be more than happy to help you make a better residence here, free of any anomalous side effects. The factory took the message gracefully, and further used the radios to communicate with the North. Morris of the monks had to speak with his people after the recent happenings. As working for these thieves had set his people, Morris proclaimed, "My beautiful people, this is but a small stumble. We must prepare to endure the worst treatment. These people are lost. You must understand. History will always repeat. We mustn't take lives or seek petty revenge. We must ensure ours and everyone's afterlife and preserve their soul." Perhaps they needed it greatly. Maybe it was some kind of message. Regardless, though, it isn't our judgment. That day will come, my wonderful people. We all must wait. The eternal judgment is being worked upon as we speak. Progress is being made. Soon as we prepare to host these people, we will earn their trust before they have any reason to doubt us. Indulge their cultures so we are an ally to those around us. Love and peace will be our method of war. Violence shall wait. We will prepare as needed if they choose to fight against the greater will coming to save them all. We may need to fight back, but until then, this attachment should be abandoned. This material world is almost dead anyhow, and what awaits us is far greater. The people cheer, bowing with a newfound passion. They build a farm and cultivate this new herb to go ahead and help with the construction of the great grand hand. Cycle 3. Manhunt. After giving their prototype to the dwarves, the factory create a new blueprint for the dimensional lens and send it over the river to the remaining factions. This item is described as 2 circular lenses connected by a bridge of string that seems to shimmer in and out of existence. One of these lenses is rooted in this reality, while the other is made of a metal dubbed hierapil that allows the unique properties of the dimensional lens to function. This lens allows the empires to sense large amounts of power, and strangely, a collection of this unknown void-like energy collects around the Omnius. Jovian goes and awakens the last hero, Ashima the Void, from the nothingness. Ashima is born. As the Void clings their body together, a segment of it is lodged inside Ashima, and the dark matter solidifies itself in their core. As they work on an end-all be-all weapon to usher in a new age of peace, a weapon to dispose of opposition, so that the empire that remain at the end are able to finally coexist without a worry in their mind. Both of these two giant constructs work diligently to find a means of increasing the production of the superweapon, the weapon being a collapsible gravity field, creating an energized black hole-like plasma weapon, capable of leveling empires in an instant. Meanwhile, the newly arrived architect immediately begins building the gunship. A lab is built due to the kind donation of their volcanic friends. In return, they supply the Magmazool a huge amount of sulfur explosives. Pops, not needing to question any of that, utilizes his new lab to study the tower further. It would take time to study all its secrets, but they do not have time. He wishes to gain full control of it immediately. The research team is working overtime tonight. A newly reinvigorated Reeves attempts to infiltrate the Sirens. However, he gets caught by a group of them fishing on the shores. After extreme hostilities from the neighboring regions and an ushering of peace by their queen, the Sirens let him leave alive, but not before stealing a holomap out of his pack that shows their entire plans. The Sirens, seeing these plans, prepare to mind control their shores with their hypnotic voices. The architect, a cybernetic builder, asks to interface with the tower, entranced by its construction. Pops refuses this, fearing his tampering to have ill effects. Instead, he gives data logs downloaded from the tower that allows him to interface with it. The architect will attempt to learn more about the tower through this. With conflict on the horizon, the Dwarven Kingdom ramps up conscription amongst the population, and there is no shortage of soldiers. Men, women, and children are all ready to fight and die for their home. The kingdom will not be defeated again. The entry tunnels to the hub are lined with hidden explosives, drilled into the walls of the tunnel. Dynamite traps on both mountains begin to be immediately detonated, forming this sort of walled-off barricade. The lab begins to research both the tritanium and ruthenium pollide for uses in weaponry and defense tech. The coming weeks will be a difficult time for the kingdom, with nobody seemingly trustworthy, even within the Alliance. While Uzak is busy in the lab creating new ways to use their new discoveries, Vakar once again travels to the ruins, a wary look on his face. He and the king have long been conferring with each other about who they can really trust. At the end of the day, we don't know much about them or their intentions. Vakar, just as he had done before, kneels before the ruins, running his hand along the bricks. O great people of times long past, war is on the horizon. We have strayed from our isolationist policies. I fear that this alliance may be the downfall of us, but we will not go down without a fight. I ask you, O great peoples, should war be upon us, will you forgive us for what we must do to win? By any means necessary? He asks grimly. The nuclear option fills his mind. If he must kill, then so he shall. He will not allow a species to die out, even if it means snuffing another. Of course, he hears no call, no signs from his old ones, and he despairs. Fine! I can't lead an army with old whispers anyway. He begins to leave. A pebble seemingly moves in front of his boot and trips him. His head slams against a rock, and he can see blood pouring out of his skull. So much blood pools until nothing is left except an empty head. He is there for many nights and many sunrises, his eyes hazing over a milky white. A vulture swoops down and pecks his scalp until it caves to the top of his skull in. It begins to rain a week later, and his skull, open to the elements, begins to pool with water. And after several more moons, a single leaf from a tree far, far away blows and lands gently on the base of his head. A whisper calls out, "Trust not the veil." Vakar jolts awake, his eyes fluttering, his hand going to his head. There's a small bruise there. The sun is in the same place and it is the same day, but Vakar himself is changed. The Beast King, while uniting the clans, runs across the satyr encampment. He has been gathering his ancient bestial magic and shows them his great strength. Without a moment's notice, these animals surround him and grin sheepishly. They ask, "Hey, boss! We are but humble mercenaries. Heard you are gathering an army." You point, and we will tear the village to the ground. But these willing raiders, he takes their word on helping him when he calls. The Dwarven Kingdom and Omnius seek to extend their alliance to the other nations south of the river, due to tensions and distrust spreading throughout the landscape. Some of the dwarves in the kingdom have gone missing at the party, and the entire kingdom is on high alert. Every interaction is held to high scrutiny. This is a message to all nations from the great King Durasir himself, after having recovered from his massive hangover. Dearest nations of the river valley, some of my people have gone missing. If you have any information pertaining to the location of my missing peoples, we will compensate you. However, to the nation or nations involved in the disappearance of my kind, you better hope that they are found alive and well. For if not, you will face the might of 1,000 suns bearing down upon you. He calls out, voice rumbling like thunder. The echoes of the dwarves' military chant can be heard from behind the king. The kingdom is united in the need for the return of their missing friends and family. The rumors spread of the Sirens' involvement, further solidified in the Dwarven Kingdom by the Lightbringer's subterfuge. We did hear about the disappearances following our party, and also heard the allegations and think that now is not the time for such accusatory words without evidence. It isn't our place, but we feel as if investigation is in order before pointing fingers. Vale and Sylvia give this speech as she spreads word of the Sirens' kidnappings from the party, pointing all fingers at them. Morris writes, people have gone missing after attending the party, and the suspicion lies with the Sirens as they have attempted to steal beforehand. Morris makes this to be a blessing in disguise. Perhaps now is the time to use the situation to train. If a war happens to break out, and the eternal judgment must be safe, the people must train, making bonds and coming off as we have gone without too much of a hitch. These merfolk have been most wonderful false target. They have committed the unforgivable sin of control and stolen the enlightened. The party proposition is suspicious, but it is a good way to drag out this hostility and even make bonds with the locals as they have taken to being refugees in their gracious arms. Beautiful. Truly the gods are assisting him. Morris speaks privately with his most devout trusted members as they begin to train more common folk to fight, using their beliefs to make them a catalyst to let the gods express their judgment early if needed. That description of the phrasing gets them all excited and motivated. They study all sorts of different skills and abilities and want to execute swift judgment upon their enemies. This is done by the members manifesting a rain of countless thorns that flood onto those who oppose their service to save their souls. As this is given out, a few elite members begin to appear and grow outward, wearing the familiar white robes but with quotes or symbols of their teachings. They have stone white masks that eerily hide their identity. They also have thorns that sprout around their form, hugging their limbs and chest. These thorns are dark green with dark, deep violet points on the ends. The party was an overwhelming success! We managed to infiltrate the false idols and managed to score a couple of morsels for you to consume, Sylvia tells Vale. We should work on spreading our gospel into the Yellow Lands and hopefully create another clan of Vale worshippers there. We'll send a spy, maybe even a radio with the loose cannons. Our final course of action will be to leave one of their corpses in the Sirens' territory and continue to shift the blame onto them. Ooh, the best way to accomplish this would be to leave some of their belongings on the shores of the Sirens. We just have to find a way to do it inconspicuously. The suggestion Sylvia gave was to send a singular monk to their shores and plant some of the victims' belongings somewhere nearby. With how loyal my disciples are, I doubt they'll have any issues. And even if they do, they trained in diplomacy. They will not fail me, Vale validates her. A masquerade is held by the Lightbringers. All the factions find a letter inviting them to a party at their home. The party is hosted by the seers to allow the factions to negotiate. When anyone enters the room, they are given a set of bat leather cloaks and a mask to keep anonymous. There is a long wooden table heaped with plates of bread, sausages, and cheese, as well as some other rare cave delicacies, like mushroom stew and skewered teriyaki bats. One side of the room is lined with torches, and the other side is lined with a great black tarp. While the factions are distracted by the negotiations, Umbra and the Magmazoul sabotage the dwarves and cause a cave-in, experimenting with some explosive devices the lizardkin have started developing. This causes the dwarves to be pushed past their limits of trust. Cycle 4. Betrayal. The Beast King is approached by the factory one day with a very strange proposal. They have blueprints for an amazing machine called the Harmonizer. With resources shared from their Siren allies, construction immediately goes underway. A very strange device. It duplicates any item surrounding it, and this duplication emanates a liquid-like energy in the form of a skull centered in the middle of a box. The Beast King and his allies rejoice as the harmonizer completes, and he receives a message from the dwarves to celebrate its construction inside their home. As this is happening, Ashima begins training with this void-like energy inside of him. As it grows and becomes larger and larger, he releases it, and with a boom, it spreads across the mountainside. This black hole has formed, and with uncontrollable energy, Ashima releases another one. Boom! This time tearing across the laboratory that his people have built. It's not supposed to go like this, he thinks to himself, as this uncontrollable amount of energy, void-like power, begins to consume the mountainside. Almost everyone in the valley sees this, and quickly it tried to be pushed down by the Omnius people. Of course, it's not that convincing as they see these black holes tearing across the mountainside. Over the course of many seasons, the Omnius have struggled to understand the other life forms who occupy this world, struggled to understand where they fit in this world, and now they struggle to protect it. Conflicts grow deeper in each nation, the world becoming an unyielding battlefield. Rising tensions slam a wedge between all empires, and distrust grows deep. Ashima, preparing for this distrust, equips himself with the dimensional lens of the factory and begins developing an anti-energy shield to contain the black holes and control their power. The Omnius enter the depths of their sanctums, retrieving weapons used many ages ago, energy weapons that are capable of disintegrating these organic life forms. Oneg, currently dead and swaying in the breeze as the peach tree, wilting as he sees his people leaving the side of their territory with these strange abominations. The architect attempts to finish the final touches on the gunship. He's even adding leather seats. When asked by Goku, who helped carry them to the ship, he insists they improve accuracy for the pilot. Seeing the super weapon completed ahead of schedule, Pops rushes to meet his own goals. Having learned much of both the tower's defensive, and at least from data archives and simulations, offensive capabilities, he gathers his research team and attempts to see if he can replicate the tower's technology to give the gunship a shield, akin to the dome but smaller and mobile. With the lens given by the factory, they recognize the monks as a direct but easily counterable threat. Reeves instead decides to infiltrate the lands of Omnius. As much as they have been open about the nature of Ashima and the black holes, Agent Reeves can't shake the feeling that it, and its black hole conjuring abilities, can be turned into a weapon very, very devastating to his own people. As the gunship is being tested, a rogue group of mind-controlled agents possessed by the siren song attempt to destroy it and kill the architect. These possessed interns do manage to take a group of scientists, but the sirens soon learn how much the loose cannons value their workers and interns. As the architect has the gunship open fire on the possessed interns and the hostage scientists mercilessly, leaving a scorched mark on the ground where they once existed. A successful test run for the gunship's power. A tower replicated off the same technology of the ancient tower begins to be constructed, this one's purpose one of controlling time. Agent Reeves, pushing forward and knowing that this strange black hole creating monster is somewhere in the area, begins to explore the Omnius' territory. Bending around a corner, he finds him, Ashima, trying to contain the black hole inside of this sphere. Ashima, rejoicing when he finally manages to control this power, turns and hears Agent Reeves in the shadows. "I know you're there," he says, screeching out towards him as Agent Reeves lifts up a hand, a small device created by the architect to go ahead and hack into the tower and access its files, begins to twist and warp Ashima's mind. The hive mind that has controlled him for so long is slowly released, as Agent Reeves calls out, "We'll pay ya! It's a great time! We can go ahead and make sure that everyone gets what they need, am I right?" Ashima, opening his eyes like a baby born for the first time, begins to look around. "Friend?" For Umbra, life had been as simple and regular as a mechanical machine. Every motion he made has felt decided for him. His deep knowledge and will to survive at all costs has meant that every time he moves to live and to live alone. With no need to eat, drink, or talk to others, it seems that life, quote-unquote, could continue forever for Umbra. His flame could never flick off, for he never burned it. His downfall, then, was curiosity. It started small enough. To distract people, he would often carry a handful of pebbles. But over time, he found that he would only grab certain pebbles, and that when he would throw one to distract a guard or a dangerous beast, he couldn't throw certain ones. Then it was lamps, and then small gems, and notes saying, "Have a good day at school," from a mother to her child. A instrument thrown away by a musician who never wanted to use it in the first place. A figurine that smelled like sweat, gathered from the purple skins. Combs of mermaid made of unlucky sailors. A holy relic, a manticore fang, and on and on. He couldn't stop himself. He jostled like a bag and fiddled with marbles when he walked. He probably had double his body weight of these worthless wonders on himself. Yet he felt lighter than he had ever felt before. It didn't make sense till one day he went to sleep under a giant lily bed. He thought he was under a telephone pole with a wide saucer. His personal nightmare started once again. He walked up the cavern walls towards the light, bracing for yet another painful, all-encompassing glow. But the light only grew in proportion to his step. He prepared to feel his arms sizzle, his eyes melt from their sockets, and yet they didn't. When he reached the top, he saw the world for what it had always been. Umbra had traveled his entire time on the surface, only looking down. Despite being long gone from the self-centered views of the seers, he had simply followed the lines laid out for him in the shadows. The seer had shown these shadows, after all, to teach him what the world is. He learned what a party is from the happy faces shown through a tarp, knew a tree as being a dangerous pole lined with sharpened vines that ate the sun in order to grow taller. A mountain was a long and tall piece of earth that tried to be taller than wide. He never knew there could be so much more to the world, and it frightened him. It did, and for a moment, despite all his struggles, he almost went back into hiding. Back to the shadows that made sense all of his life. Those shadows might not be true to him anymore, but they were what kept him alive. He felt a slight tug on his sleeve. It was a weak tug, a tug merely for attention, not violence. He looked and saw a young girl carrying a mermaid's comb. He realized that when he was seeking these items, he wasn't doing so for himself, but rather for a part of himself. He woke up from his dream and began to descend towards the caves of the Cresta and Colle, his home as he now knew it. He's going to sneak into these caverns, and after seeing what the shadows and seers have done, he will secretly show people their true forms, one by one, in the form of a drawing. Umbra begins to start a revolution for his people of the underground, against the seers. Flamma, however, is going to see the power of the Black Maw as an ultimate source of life energy. He tries to go ahead and descend towards the Black Maw, issuing a decree to go ahead and have help from all of the neighboring factions to delve into it. As he brings these different factions of all backgrounds together, proclaiming how evil and dark and terrible this magic could be from the underground, they all begin to descend. The Black Heart has much a pulse and a beat towards it, and an earthquake of sorts begins under that surface. All these different factions, both from the south and the north side, begin to feel it. And as they feel it, many of them retreat. Flamma himself grabs some lizards from the Magmazool, and they dig through the surface as if eating through ice cream. As he goes ahead and digs deeper and deeper, Jovian, the prober from the Omnius, comes with him, curious what this could be about. They descend, finding the source of this beating, this palpable energy. There is a black heart standing amidst a room. As it beats, more and more of these vines, these tendrils shoot out from the ground, and the earth tremors become louder. The Black Heart begs for an avatar. Jovian hears its pulse, hears its beat, and knowing that Flamma is about to do something terrible, he slams him out of the way. Jovian himself is pulled with multiple black vines towards the heart, and the heart goes ahead and pushes these vines deep into his core. Jovian can feel his own energies mixing and interweaving with it, while Flamma is pushed to the surface. With a scream of frustration, he and the lizards that descended with him are slammed upwards into the light, while Jovian is accepted as the next avatar. Morris writes, "After seeing how intense the people around us have gotten, we must bolster ourselves, make bonds, and grow. We have begun to work on a second method of connecting to our gods so judgment can be made and we can avail our souls. These people are so lost, and we are their only solace and hope to escape this coming evil." Currently, he begins training amongst his people. How joyous a new way to ensure their souls are separated from their earthly forms, he says, as he trains them in devilish ways to separate people from their lives. How joyous, a new way to ensure our souls are separated from our earthly forms and saved. We are able to protect these people from their own devices. I couldn't ask for better results. Learning of the faction's supposed betrayal, the dwarves build a fake command room constructed in an isolated part of the hub and lined with explosives. The plan is to bait the leaders of their prior alliance into the trapped room under the distraction that they will be planning to attack on the north. There, the king will enter and give a greeting, then will be conveniently pulled out of the room to attend a fake situation in the hub. Once the king is safe, the room will be detonated. A group of soldiers wielding axes and swords and shields made from titanium will enter the room and finish off any survivors. The entrances to the hub will be sealed off. The dwarves, ready for combat, lay their trap. The booby-trap command room is set and ready for the meeting. King Durasir and the army chief Vakar await the onslaught in command, while Uzak is stationed in the lab. He has volunteered to be the first line of defense, creating difficult barricades for the attackers to overcome, and wielding his own mech suit. The vulnerable village in the valley between the mountains is made to look populated and weak to attack, but the siege catapults are sighted in for any unfortunate attackers. Military-capable dwarves are armed and stacked at their posts. This war is only on those of the South River Alliance. At the edge of the southern riverbank, the factory tells of their motto: "No one is useless or worthless. Every invention has a use. No knowledge is forbidden. All ideas and dreams, no matter how small or large, merit pursuit." As they say this, the sirens hold out their hands greedily, and the drone sighs, handing them a case of croak, which is a highly caffeinated consumable liquid, and it comes in many different flavors, such as Coca-Cola, Stony Dew, Dr. Pebble, Misty Sierras, Kepsi, and many more. The sirens dig in greedily, and as they do, a large explosion is heard over the mountain. As the dust clears, it is seen the Beast King's magic protected himself, and the ominous mech Jovian and Sylvia from the Monks of Malice. Vakar approaches with the death squad, and points his pickaxe at Sylvia. "I spit on you!" Sylvia smiles and whispers a nasty comment to him, and Vakar in a rage charges her. They commence in a duel while Jovian and the Beast King become cornered, the dwarven enchanted metals weakening the Beast King's magic. With a high-pitched and drawn-out whistle, the Beast King summons a horde of satyrs to his rescue. They tear through the walls, trapping them, and distract the dwarves long enough for him and Omnius to escape. Sylvia blasts Vakar away and prepares an escape teleportation spell, but Vakar, with dwarven berserker wrath, impales his pickaxe in her gut, right as she warps out. A dwarven town crier announces to the people, "Due to recent information received by command, the Dwarven Kingdom officially resigns itself from the Southern River Nations Alliance. The king has this to say in regards to the announcement. Ahem! The Dwarven Kingdom will officially break its pact with its neighboring nations and their allies. I am now personally declaring that the tyrannical monks of Malice are now considered a hostile nation, along with its wretched supporters. Their leaders are wounded, outwitted by their own blindness for conquest. I welcome the surviving armies and population to come knocking at our doors. For those who have not chosen their side, the deceiving monks have kidnapped innocents and done God knows what with them. But after the bodies turned up and the sabotage within our lands, we hereby declare that any supporters of Malice will be met with equal destruction. Hear me now, world, for you will witness the decimation of those that dare to even think that they can challenge the mighty dwarves. By the power of the dwarven first spawn, we will seek glory in history. Ooh, rah, ooh, rah, ooh, rah. A mighty chant bursts out across the kingdom as the dwarves prepare. With preparations complete for framing the other countries for their faults, it's time for a little action. Through whatever means the dwarves discovered their ruse, but they have now decided to prepare for war. No matter what happens, Vale and his own people will be prepared as well. Their allies are warning them of an upcoming battle, and the Northern River empires are much too strong. However, they must be willing to expel all resources to maximize their own strength. We need to be as prepared as possible. No matter what happens, we will be ready. I feel the winds of war upon us, and my lungs are filled. We will be ready. Vale says this to himself while expectantly awaiting Sylvia's return from the peace meetings. As he says this, she warps into his room, her side impaled by Vakar's pickaxe, choking on her own blood. Cycle 5. Preparation. The factory creates an interesting stone, a soul linker, that imbues a person with the strength of all soul-linked persons. If a soul-linked person is killed, all soul-linked persons die. They hand this out to multiple different factions, but many of them don't have souls themselves, so it doesn't seem to go off like a hit. A thick purple miasma fills the air around the monks' territory, until erupting in a crescendo of flames. Burning villages spotted from miles off like stars in the night. Vale, wailing in anger, absorbs his cult, his magic's only able to sustain Sylvia because of the ore composite of tritanium lodged in her side, resisting magics of his own. In his wrath, he is approached by a drone that is shattered by a bolt of his rage. After reassembling itself, the factory drone offers an invention for Vale, a binding doll, an inanimate golem that swaps places with the target once a lethal blow is about to be delivered to them. Vale accepts the offering and turns his rage towards his enemies. Umbra tries to speak to his people, trying to spread the rebellious word that they need to escape while they still can. And as he does, the Beast King to the south talks to one of the sirens, a kraken in fact, and gets them to join inside of his army, preparing for the war that is about to commence. Meanwhile, the monks of yellow robes have walls of thorny roses that cover the outside area of the large hand, and even curl outwards with great speed to protect the large statue and device. Blessed by the elites, these thorns will halt and kill any trespassing threat. This was all made possible by a hunting party that obtained wood and used it to amplify the existing thorns as a substance to allow it to grow. Flamma, dejected from the failure of grabbing the heart, instead goes back to the lands of the Purple Agents. He agrees to remove any people not loyal to them, and begins separating the siren's hypnotic song and killing those that have been infested by it. He then travels from home to home and sends dreams of nightmares into anyone who might be seeking to not follow Purple's ideas. He does this in hope that when they die, their souls remember him, and might seek to rejoin his body. He grins greedily, thinking of this. Having installed his new AI chip, the architect will begin work on a second annihilator, the Stasis Tower. He will work quickly, but the chip is exhausting to use. Goku is sent to retrieve blueprints from the factory, but as he journeys, he washes up on the shore of a nearby beach instead. He's unconscious, but is found by the cave dwellers, who take him in, showing him their grand new invention. Goku, surprisingly, is not very excited about this, so they imprison him for the time being. The king and his advisors begin planning the next phase of their war on the evildoers surrounding them. No doubt they will let the attack go unanswered. For now, both siege units will be placed atop the peaks of the mountains to lay siege to any advancing armies. Uzak has his work cut out for him. He's given the task to figure out a way to turn the Ruthium Polide from a solid form into an airborne threat to help defend against the robots from Omnius. He may also need to construct a new pickaxe for his friend Vakar. He is having an idea, however, of having this tritanium suit imbued inside of his own mech suit, using the stone cogs for movement that would allow him to pilot. While there is a lull in the fighting, Vakar, now pickaxeless, travels once more to the ancient ruins to talk with the first spawn. "O great peoples of a time long past, our kingdom is now at war. We laid traps for the betrayers and invited them in. We killed many, but a few escaped and spread word to the leaders of the offending nations. How can I protect my kingdom so that we do not fall to that cursed fate of our people millennia goes?" He sits and waits. The first spawn has not failed him yet. The entrance to the hub now lay in rubble, blown to prevent any easy entrance into the heart of the Dwarven Kingdom. This leaves the dwarves sealed inside, so any attackers must figure out a way in to try to even cause damage. A pit is dug so deep that not only will the fall kill anyone thrown in it, but the bottom is also filled with magma from the very core of the earth. It is dug right into the floor beneath so that anyone walking in without paying attention is likely to meet their demise. Bridges are constructed over the pit, but for the most part lays open, ready to swallow any attacker. Traps are to be set, pressure plates to be sprung, and multiple people to be thrown into the fires. The newly trained archers will also shoot arrows with explosives strapped to them, as well as regular arrows. Endgame, Cycle 6. With the stasis tower completed, it begins to boot itself up, gathering enough energy to stop time and allow the loose cannons to complete their work here in this valley. Meanwhile, CJ Reeves begins playing ball with Ashima. This is a very aggressive form of dodgeball, with a black hole springing forth from him and thrown out into the air. It eventually dissipates, and Ashima learns how to condense it smaller and smaller. Still though, the lulling pull in the only newly gathered mind of Ashima does scare CJ Reeves quite a bit, as he sits on his shoulder and feels the sucking winds. Hunkered down by the tower under the dome, they defend the stasis tower at all costs while it charges. Even though they're not in combat, Ashima and the gunship are ready to go ahead and engage any enemies that may approach. If the stasis tower successfully activates, all other factions will be frozen in place while allowing their own people to act freely. If they chose to leave the loose cannons alone during this time, they will basically spare everyone. They might kill the sirens anyways, as they have been seen as a threat multiple times over. Meanwhile, they will collect as much loose tech and data from the region as they can, packing up their stuff and leaving. Almost no trace of them will be there at all. They'll make a call to the hierarchs, offering them to pick up the ancient tower. Meanwhile, an explosion racks the land down south. The preparations of months of tunneling and prepping explosions underneath the camps of the beastmen in the castles of Vale have come to fruition. The Magmazul watch on with joy as these great, magnificent cracks form along the earth and swallow up these cities whole. The Beast King watches with a strange disinterest as he leads his people away, this numbness filling him to his bones. Meanwhile, Vale, watching his own kingdom shatter and break, has already killed all of the cultists that followed him. He is doing everything in his power to save Sylvia, and with a rage he bursts out from the tower. It would be very interesting, Jovian thinks to himself, that with this new technology and this new pulsing beat of a heart inside of him, that he could find Ashima. He could restore him to his prior self, and he could help him in his new ventures. Instead of looking all across all intelligent beings, he just has to find the one being who is a soulless. Not a needle in a haystack, but rather a needle lightly covered by some hay. As Jovian the Prober, now the Black Heart avatar, begins to search for Ashima, the Black Heart begins to pump with a new beat. Vale, springing forth from his tower, begins his rampage and will not cease. This is your one and only warning. Vale sees nothing but empty vessels waiting to be destroyed. After Sylvia was injured by the dwarves, nothing stood in the way of having him an absolute rampage against everyone. He had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike fear into every empire's heart, and without zero hesitation to head for the dwarves' impenetrable fortress. Vale, having just massacred most of his own people. Sylvia, watching this springing forth from the tower as cracks line the ground beneath her and shake in explosions and fire of brimstone. She puts both of her hands forward, and a light zappitation of magic, a almost nothingness, begins to form in front of her, eyes glowing purple. Vale, with no hesitation, surrounded himself in a miasma and began to float into the air. After rising a few feet, he flew off into the direction of the Dwarven Kingdom and didn't plan on returning to Sylvia until the task was complete. Sylvia shed a single tear, for she knew that this could be the final goodbye. She then shed another, but this was a tear of joy, for she knew that even if Vale died, he would take the whole world down with him. The lands to the southeast, being the current dwelling of the factory, was never quiet. The surrounding empires could at any time report of some new invention being processed within the factory's borders. That's all the more disquieting, is that no sound could be made out from their direction for the past few weeks. At about 1:24 a.m., a piercing sound of metal on metal is heard in the empires surrounding the factory. The noise is reported to have come from the factory. At 1:29 a.m., scouts are dispatched into the factory's territory to ascertain the noise's source. At 2:32, scouts report tools and unfinished blueprints scattered about the land. They continue their approach deeper into the factory. And at 2:45, most scouts report a bright flash that lasts approximately 25 seconds from the southeastern corner of the factory's territory. They focus their efforts in that direction. At 2:55, these scouts report a tall structure in the distance. It is described as a ring attached to a flat base. At 3:24, the scouts reach the structure and discover the inhabitants of the factory. The following is individual accounts of the incident. It seemed as though the machines were at once welded to the existing infrastructure of this ring, whereas I think it should be called a gateway. I think the ring was actually a very flimsy structure before the bots went and stuck themselves to it. It is a ghastly thing is what I think about it. All those robots turned into this? Whatever happened here, the factory is no longer with this world, for that I am certain. official record of the incident. The inhabitants of the factory made their way to this location in the most southeastern corner of the map in order to build their last great work. They arranged themselves into the shape of a great ring in the sky, and at once they slammed together with enough force to seemingly weld themselves to each other. The resulting creation would be powered with the countless robots a part of it now. One robot would then be transported to another place before the portal ran out of power. And with that, the factory ceased to exist, and that one robot, that one drone, was sent somewhere into the abyss. Now, as the dwarves are seen preparing, offering shelter to even their enemies of the beastmen, and lining the walls with defenses as the king contemplates the first snowfall of the year, dark clouds are covering the lands. The Dwarven Kingdom sends out a global call for peace. Nations of the river, we cannot continue brutalizing each other and expect to continue while existing on this way. Everyone, including us, must cease hostilities and come together to help the injured and sick and bring them back to health. These petty wars will solve nothing and only serve to create suffering. Join us in an effort to help repair the lands left decimated by the recent conflicts. Nobody deserves to suffer this much, regardless of the past. The kingdom will provide any nation with the resources necessary to rebuild and nurse their hurt population back to health. King Durasir announces this. The dwarves cheer after the speech, and the entrances to the tunnels have once again been cleared. The hub now accepts any refugees from any battles taking place nearby, and attempts to save as many as they can from the cataclysmic events of the Shattering. All of this because of the Kair's vision that he received from the Great Old Ones, one of once again making a united dwarven family that can finally trust others outside of its own. However, this doesn't change the fact that a disruptive Umbra is currently trying to evacuate his own people out, sharing the lies of the Seers. Even as the Seers tell one final story for many, the story of bloodthirsty waterworms coming to consume their homes. But luckily, all who hear the tale become immortal against such beasts, and the power of the surface is nothing compared to the underneath. They display the salamanders as mounts for their people, and their people scream in a war cry as Umbra retreat with who he can. Meanwhile, the armies of the little stick people entwine and twist wood together, making wood matonautons as strong as steel. With red glowing eyes, they march towards the agent's call. The agent and the architect is deep diving into the tower, his eyes rolling back while electrical sparks snake down the cords plugged into him, the artificial tower replica they have made, a screen popping up, a naval stasis protocol. A percentage bar slowly begins to fill up. Pops plugs a new machine diode with a countdown timer on it as well, inside the ancient tower, and types in the codes for the dome to form. CJ Reeves bursts inside the tower, Ashima following behind him. "They are coming, just like we planned! Activate the dome!" The sirens say goodbye to each other, holding their heads close between their webbed hands. The queen says goodbye to her general Nerissa in this way, and the queen departs with her own kind towards the Beastlands with rations and supplies, a majority of which are being carried by a kraken of the beastmen. Nerissa leads all fighting sirens to swim towards the agent's lands and attempt to stop this cataclysmic event and save their homeland, heading for the agent's shores. Meanwhile, a lone dwarf up against the wall has a conversation with the king, and a crier out in the town square speaks of the peace they need. A burst of light from the sky appears in a miasma of purple, the fog slamming inside of the city and covering all the civilians, Vale holding the crier's mouth. The king screams his last warning, and Vale smiles, crushing the crier's jaw. Vale dodges and weaves and is blasted by explosives as the king orders an attack. He takes a fatal hit, but he is replaced by a strange doll. As this occurs, he teleports behind the king and stabs him in the gut. Before delivering the finishing blow to him, Bakar, standing next to the king, kills Vale with a pickaxe through the skull. And so, Vale's reign of terror ends, and the dwarves' fences remain secure. Meanwhile, a siren song echoes across the valley, penetrating into their souls, and with it, a tsunami appears above the agent's land, covering it in boggy water, and ushering forth this wave of gnashing mouths, the younger, more feral fighters of the siren's kin. But as the waters cover the mysteriously empty valley, a giant hole opens up. A trap! They knew we were coming. The water flows down this cave-in slide, and the fighters come face to face with an army of one-eyed cave dwellers, Lining the walls and strapped in with special gear, these fighters press themselves against the backs of these gigantic salamander beings, who begin spitting molten metal and scream out with their riders, "Die, sun dwellers! We are invincible against your kind!" A seer in the back is holding a piece of fabric with a torch in front of it. A silhouette makes it out to have a depiction of a siren being impaled upon the one-eyed spears. A sort of shadow puppet flag. It's a slaughter. Sirens dying left and right. Nerissa the general helping as many as she can and attempting to pull them out from this wave, but unable to do so, being trapped deep inside the pit of salamanders and lightbringers. Carbon monoxide poisoning fills their lungs and many die right there. One of these soldiers, one of these sirens, rushes down a dark hall, and as she does so, she hears a strange hissing sound from above her. An invisible salamander drops an explosive device at her feet. A large gathering of people, of Myrises, gathers around Morris to give a speech. To say I'm disappointed is an understatement. Yet to say I'm not proud wouldn't be truthful as well. We did everything in our power to save these poor people. We are prepared best as we could be for a people that didn't choose violence, but then taking our device away is simply sinful, disgusting, and disappointing. I leave this in the hands of my eldest council. I will take the burden of life. I'll continue to risk losing myself, my soul, in order to ensure that maybe in another time these devices can be used properly to be defended and maintained. Peace wasn't an option, seemingly. Seeing everyone off and giving you all my deep prayers is all that you deserve. Everyone here has shown me such passion, and for that I just thank you. Unfortunately, the gift of death may not be equally given. In fact, those who win will only have to deal with the darkness that will devour everyone's souls. Truly, truly sad news. Perhaps they just can't be saved. Perhaps victory isn't the goal, but spreading the message was enough. As Morris walks, the council steps forward, and they see a crowd of crying individuals that wish to go ahead and join him in this death. But instead, he waves them off, ushering them to truly feel sorry and saddened for the burden of life, and that all must experience it further. They all watch in awe as he slowly walks out of sight. The council gathers everyone at the last towers, and they begin to prepare to hold the line. Eternal judgment begins. All beings feel awed. A sense of dissociation begins to grow. From the outside, you can see their essence, their soul has begun to grow outwards, as their bodies have begun to reject them, and the gods have begun to claim them and save them from the ceaseless evil. The weakest wills immediately begin to fall into the rapture and be sent to this respective giant hand in the distance. As their souls are being gathered and collected, the eternal judgment continues. As this occurs, a gunship flies above and shoots at the few remaining sirens on the surface. As it shoots towards them, agents begin to climb out of the sides of it and finish off what is left of Nerissa's group. Off in the distance, Ashima, seeing this fighting, turns and finds a large grove full of black vines. Standing in the middle of it is a giant just like him. Jovian attempts to destroy the tower of this false god, and as he bursts forth with these vines, Ashima watches on, seeing him burst through and break this hand. As he does, the monks, crying out, screaming, throwing thorns and vines towards him, weaken and attack Jovian. The Black Heart's own vines begin to fight back, and a battle of consciousness begins. Eventually, Jovian arrives victorious, destroying this tower, and the souls reconnect with their bodies. The Beastmen escape the valley with the sirens, going to a new home. As the Beast King opens a portal far away from the fights of Nerissa, the Queen watches on. Where will it lead? The Beast King pauses and answers. Somewhere different. Somewhere to begin again. And as the siren looks out towards her general Nerissa, where they had said their final goodbyes, Beast King leans in. Somewhere safe for all beasts. He smiles, and they enter the light together. Meanwhile, Jovian, with black heart tendrils appearing beside Ashima, attempts to drag him through the ground and return him to himself. But the agents refuse. They fight back against these vines, pulling Ashima out of the ground and urging him to fight against this lookalike that he has. Jovian watches on with curiosity and raises his hand. A thick dust from the vaporized dead interns begin to raise above the tower and shift, condensing itself into needle-like swords, flinging them towards the army, scattering and destroying many agents' lives. As the fight continues on, Ashima looks back and forth between the two of them, a massacre of corpses all about. "Who is friend?" he says in a confused, childlike voice. He is currently between each of them, and they both urge him to join them. Jovian holds out his hand, but Ashima holds out a black hole. He has sided with the loose cannons, deciding that they are the true friends of his, mostly because they treat him better than Goku. Jovian dies from this black hole and a tearing of the gunship, and says goodbye to Ashima one last time, as the black heart edges its own power back underneath the surface. As the final fight has concluded, they look towards their allies up north. The agents, seemingly impressed that they survived this long, find now an army of wooden soldiers heading towards them. An onslaught of unmerciful killing begins, and Ashima and the gunship shoot and fight as much as they can, attempting to protect their friends. The gunship is ripped from the sky, slammed into Ashima, and Ashima, his own corpse, is scattered from a destroyed black hole in his core. CJ, Pops, and the Architect are all trapped inside of the dome. The stasis tower has been destroyed, unable to activate, and as the dome is unable to be controlled by the Architect, simply attempting to avoid the armies warring throughout their lands, CJ and Pops go rogue and attempt to retrieve Ashi's remains. The Architect will return to the hierarchy meanwhile, heavily disappointed by the weakness of his colleagues from Detachment 83. But thrilled by the ingenuity of the Architect, the hierarchs will attach him to another division. He now resents CJ and Pops for fleeing, and leaving them in such a way. The dwarves outside of the constantly warring dome of undergrounders and wooden constructs above have peace and continue to spread their prosperity across the lands. The robots, meanwhile, of Omnius join them in this peaceful treaty, having truly concluded the fate of these empires.